evening and welcome, and thank you very much for being here this evening. I'm going to start with introductions, and that's always something that you're a little afraid that maybe you'll forget somebody or something, but I'm going to try to get everybody. I've been taking good notes as you've been coming in. First of all, I'd like to thank and acknowledge my wife Jennifer for being with us here tonight. Jennifer. We have almost our entire city council here. We expect Marby to come later, Marby Lee, but we do have council members Larry Carr, Mark Grzan, and Greg Sellers with us this evening. We have almost our entire senior city staff, and I'll just read their names. The city manager is Ed Tweez. The assistant, who was extremely helpful in helping me put together this presentation for this evening, is Brian Stott. Really want to thank him for that. Chief Bruce Cumming is with us of the Police Department, Public Works Director Jim Ashcraft, Kathy Malloy Prevasich, who does Community Development, and our Recreation and Community Services Manager, Steve Reimer. Business Assistance and Housing Services is led by Garrett Toy. Jack Dillis does finance for us. And our HR director is Mary Kay Fisher. And last but not least is our elected city clerk, another elected official who also works for the city, and that's Irma Torres. So let's give them a big hand. For our other elected officials, we have representing Senator Abel Maldonado, Diana Bautista is with us this evening. Thank you for being here, Diana. And two members of the Morgan Hill Unified School District School Board are here with us, Kathy Sullivan and Don Moody. Thanks for being with us, guys. Former elected with us, the former Mayor of Morgan Hill, Dennis Kennedy. Dennis, if you can stand. Dennis recently had a knee replaced, but he's starting to move extremely well, so we're glad to see that. I'm going to read a list of the commissioners that are with us this evening. We are really, really thankful to all our commissioners. They serve, uncompensated. They serve the city of Morgan Hill and just do a tremendous job of supporting what we as a council are trying to get done in the city of Morgan Hill, trying to make it better. So let me read their names. From our Senior Advisory Committee is Gloria Subox. From our Mobile Home Rent Control Committee is Swanee Edwards. From our BTAC, that's Bicycle and Trails Advisory Committee, is Lisa Aragon. From our Parks and Recreation Commission is Marty Cheek. And also from the Parks and Recreation Commission, the current chairman, Marilyn Liebers. From the Planning Commission, Joel Mueller. We have two representatives of our Youth Advisory Committee with us today. Jonathan Bio, who happens to be the current Student of the Year, and Acela Banuelos, who happens to be last year's Student of the Year in Morgan Hill. From the Library, Cultural, and Arts Commission, we have two representatives, Stan Salah and Chuck Dillman. Let's give all of them a big round. And welcome to Marby. She did make it. We appreciate that very much. Okay, now we'll go through the presentation. I'm going to do this presentation. If you were here last year, you saw me do a fairly formal presentation where I read from a script, and I'm not going to do that this year. I'm going to try a little bit different approach. I'm going to kind of talk to some notes that I have taken, but really kind of take you through the slides and just talk to them as I go through them, and then we'll open it up to questions at the end. This is kind of the overview of what I'm going to talk about. We'll review the past year. It's really not we've gone 2 months into this year already, so we're going to talk about the whole last year since I gave the State of the Union, or State of the City last time. We'll talk about our goals. I think it's very important to go back and review exactly how we did on our goals from 2007, because when we want to talk about what we're going to do in 2008, where we're going in the future, I think there's so much that is dependent on where we've been in the past. So it's very important, I think, to cover those so you'll set the base for the 2008 direction. I did want to start by recognizing some of the people that we had with us as employees of the city. One in particular, a police officer with the city, Rick Vestal, served the city for 22 years. And last December, he was having some open heart surgery and things went south, and he never did recover. So we lost one of our great police officers, Rick Vestal, and I just wanted to have a last remembrance of him. We had I'm going to start out with some kind of the not so good news that we had from last year. That way, when I talk about all the great news that we did have, we'll end on the high note kind of thing. One of the things that we're a little bit frustrated about is our perchlorate situation. We've been doing everything we can to make sure that you, the citizens of Morgan Hill, have healthy drinking water. We have been treating the water down to a level of so that it is, if it ever exceeds 4 parts per billion of the perchlorate in the content of the water, we treated it and got it down to that level. We found out this year that the state was going to set as the safety level 6 parts per billion. So we were actually treating it more than we needed to, according to what they finally came out with as their guideline. And we've been working, a year ago, we found out that the Regional Water Quality Control Board was indeed identifying the Oldham Corporation as the bad guy, the people that were doing the polluting of the water, that had put the perchlorate in the water. So that was at the very end of 2006, and so we thought going into 2007 we'd be getting some good news. They would be asked to clean it up and take care of things and kind of recompensate us for the work that we had done in cleaning up the water for you. And we were very, very frustrated in this effort in that they came out at the beginning of December with their cleanup order, and they did say very strongly to clean up the very strong concentrations of perchlorate that exist down in San Martin, but that's not where the people live. The people live up here in Morgan Hill. We have the density of the residents up here in Morgan Hill, and their approach to treating perchlorate here is to watch it and monitor it and hope it goes away. It's a process they have given the acronym monitored attenuation. Just watch it and hope that it goes away. And obviously the concentrations of perchlorate will go down over time because new water comes in and dilutes things, but we don't think it's the right approach. We think that the polluter should be responsible for doing what the law says, which is to clean it up to the background level, the level that it was before the pollution happened. So we've been quite frustrated in that effort. We are treating one of our wells that has been over even the 6 parts per billion, the Tennant well, and they're not choosing to compensate us for the treatment that we're doing there either. So we're going to appeal that process. It is a little frustrating. We're not going to give up, though. We're going to keep going after Olin and hope that we get some kind of satisfaction eventually there. Another area that we've recently, and I think we all remember this because it's just over a month ago, is the flooding situation here. And just a very strong reminder of the situation that we have with needing more flood control in downtown Morgan Hill. And we'll talk more in terms of our objectives and what we're doing about it, but we do see, some of the Wright Avenue, person had to be taken out of a car that was stuck in the intersection there. The pictures from the gas station are kind of telling in terms of how deep the water was. The residents in Bisaglia, that apartment building on the ground floor, had to be relocated after the flood. So we are just very strongly reminded that we need to do something about this, and we intend to. I want to recognize we have quite a few new employees at City Hall and in the city of Morgan Hill. And I wanted to recognize them and show you them. These are the ones that kind of work in the area of City Hall. New marketing person for our recreation department, Maureen Giuliani, a new budget person in our finance department. We have recently added 2 people to our business assistance and housing services unit. Erwin and Ordonez is going to specialize in housing, while Tammy is specializing in economic development. We have a new person in community development, and then we put a staff to do our own IT. We used to contract for IT from outside, and now we brought a staff in-house under the city manager, Jeff Rosenberger and Mike Fumigali. We have a lot of new police officers, and the chief told us last week at our city council meeting that for the first time, with the addition of 13, there's actually 2 pages, I won't go over them all, but there's 13 new employees in the last year of our police department, and for the first time in many years, our dispatchers are fully staffed, and that's a great accomplishment, and we appreciate that. We also have quite a few new workers in our public works department. Most of these are in the maintenance area. The one that I would point out is Rebecca Fotu, who is working with Tony Yulo now in the environmental department. So we have doubled the staff of our environmental people. And one employee that I want to recognize is our employee of the year, Francis Smith. Francis has been part of the community development department for many, many years. When I was on the planning commission many years ago, I just recognized her back then for just her outstanding customer support, her can-do attitude, and so forth. And she has been recognized as the employee of the year for this year. And she kind of just symbolizes all the employees that we have in the city. We really have fantastic employees, so I wanted to recognize them. Okay, let's go over some of the great stories from 2007 and into this year. And you just can't help but start with the CRC. What a success. What a great thing it has turned out to be. Everything we expected and more. And you see some of the pictures of the kids, the people doing exercises and the pool. And then right next to the CRC is our dog park, which again is just a huge, fantastic success. It's always being utilized heavily. We have down on the right, we have the senior nutrition program. The seniors gather there every morning. I didn't find a picture of the youth center. I guess we didn't have one there, but the youth are also there in the afternoons, and that program is getting stronger and stronger as we go forward. And we are seeing that interchange between the seniors and the youth. And so the intergenerational aspect seems to be getting off the ground, and that's great. Depot Street, we opened Depot Street. That was a pretty long project that we completed to revitalize Depot Street. And we had the unveiling back in the spring. We see the ribbon cutting where that's Garrett in the Eagles outfit there that's helped us in several things. He was with us for the Centennial as well. And one of the highlights there, of course, was the unveiling of the Waiting for the Train statue, Marlene Amarian. And you see Marlene kind of in the center of the picture, standing with her creation of the statue there. We had the Wind Symphony playing at the opening, and then you see some pictures both daylight and nighttime, where it's very well lit during the night. And how can you ever not recognize the new library? What a fantastic event the opening was, and how fantastic it has been ever since. And for the opening, we expected a crowd of about 1,500 people to be there that day, coming through the library. We got 4,500, 3 times our expectation. So that kind of showed the pent-up demand for the library. Since then, the statistics are 30% increase in circulation, and for new cards, people going to the library and saying, I got to take advantage of this, I got to get a card. Our new card rate is 80% higher than it was a year ago. 80%. That's great. Thank you. This picture down here, you really can't see it, but I'm about to cut the ribbon, and that was one of the scariest things that ever happened to me, because when I cut that ribbon, I did the snap, and that crowd of 4,500 people came into the library, and they weren't going to let anybody get in their way, and boy, did I almost get run down there. But it was great. What a fantastic day that was, and it's been fantastic ever since, ongoing. We also had a great time. This was the end of November. It was probably one of the coldest days of this winter, but boy, the everybody out there at the Outdoor Sports Center for the opening that night they weren't cold. They were there. They were running around the fields, having a great time. Show some of the new scoreboard, the sign out front, and so forth. Again, we had a ribbon cutting that night, but it was great to see the youth having a great time there. There's more demand for these fields than we can meet, so we have more work to do in the future to get the future phases of that center up and off the ground, and we will do that. Our budget, this is a very, very simple slide. There is so much behind this slide that I can't take the time to go into, but basically, bottom line, we came out with a budget surplus. Wasn't quite as much as we had projected at the beginning of the year, but whenever you're positive, that's a lot better than being negative. And we were positive by about $150,000. And that allowed us to slightly build on our balance in the general fund so that we do have a reserve of over $10 million still there. So in the black, and this is thanks to again, our city staff that does a fantastic job, not only of putting the budget together and doing that process, but also of doing what's needed in terms of efficiency, in terms of productivity, to make sure that these numbers come out the way that they need to. Initiatives. Now, when you go online to find clip art, you can't find vicious dogs. I'm trying to find pictures of vicious dogs because we had this dangerous dog ordinance that we adopted, but all they show in the clip art is the cute ones. And man, these were the least cute I could find, and they're still up there. What's important is, and I'm calling it initiatives, because what's important here is the involvement of the community, where the people, we didn't come up with this. This wasn't something initiated by the city in any way, shape, or form. This was initiated by people in our community that saw a need to do something, came forward, said, we'll work with you, and they did, and we were able to put a couple of things together. One, to have more forceful enforcement of dangerous dogs when situations do occur, when other dogs or people get attacked. We've upped the penalties there. And the other is the social host ordinance that we passed, where we're making people take responsibilities for their domiciles in terms of if parties are going on there and so forth, they'll be held responsible, and there's levels of fine and so forth. And the social host ordinance, you might think, well, that's a bunch of concerned parents. No, we had a lot of youth involved in asking for that too. They were pushing right along with the adults, so that was great to see. Self-sufficiency is what I'm labeling this one. We can call it economic development, we could call it more retail, but I think of it as self-sufficiency, because we're getting Morgan Hill to the point where whatever you want, you can go. You don't have to go to Gilroy, you don't have to go to Oak Ridge, you don't have to go to East Ridge, you don't have to go anywhere. You can find it here. Men's Warehouse, where I used to have to go up to the Almaden to buy suits, I can now do it here, beds, so forth. And so we've got great new centers in terms of out there on Cochrane, and they're filling up. I think Staples opens on Wednesday, so getting more. Environmental, we had a goal last year that we accomplished in terms of putting a strategy together for environmental, and we've gone beyond the strategy now, where we have, I've shown on the chart 6 of the new projects that we're implementing just for the first 6 months of this year. And I'll talk more about that. We'll extend that later on. This is in addition to 12 ongoing projects. So now we have 18 separate projects in the environmental area going on. We'll talk more about where we're going with that later. Affordable housing, we opened the apartments. Well, it's not just apartments. It's a combination of apartments and single-family housing that's available at the Royal Court, which is the one on the left there, the 2 pictures on the left. The bottom picture is the for sale, the housing units, the single-family housing units. And then we broke ground on Madrone Plaza. Madrone Plaza is off Cochrane and Butterfield. It's the construction that's going on now. And that's a combination of townhouses and condominiums and single-family houses, some market rate, most some below market rate, and they're under construction for opening probably this summer. So we've made great progress in affordable housing. Downtown, toward the end of the year, we did some notable acquisitions of properties in the downtown. We have our plans to make downtown spectacular. We're calling it our spectacular downtown now, and I think that's a suitable way to refer to it. We acquired the downtown mall, the Granada Theater. We show a parking lot there that we're in the act of acquiring as well. We're doing a couple of things. We're looking for properties that we can kind of consolidate so that we can have developers come in and really do the right kind of startup development there to trigger more development by other property owners in the downtown. And of course, I think we all understand the need for parking in our downtown, so we're going to do more and continue with the parking as we go along. I said I'd talk a little bit more about the Youth Advisory Commission, our commission, whatever they are. Not to single them out, I want to make sure that I recognize that every single commission that we have is a very strong contributor to what we do. We appreciate everyone. I just wanted to kind of single out the YAC because they're a little bit different than the other committees and commissions. They're not so much in support of us accomplishing our goals as a city council as they are to, their charge is more or less to make sure the youth of the community are well served, have things to do, are active, can be involved in things, and they do an outstanding job of that. And this is just some of the things that they put on. The fashion show was just last month, and that was a big thing right down the hall here that was a fantastic production. We've been involved, we're now in our third year producing something called Youth Leadership Morgan Hill, where it's a 3-day program where they bring in youth from the high school and junior high school and give them some leadership kinds of training. They do what they call their Senior Citizens Ball, where the seniors come, have dinner, have a dance. The picture up there on the top shows some of the intermingling, the intergenerational mingling of the youth with the seniors. They get out there and dance with the seniors, and it's just a great evening. The seniors, as they leave from those evenings, they just have a great big huge smile on their face, really having a great time. And then they have this Ruthless concert during the summer with Battle of the Bands kind of thing. A whole bunch of bands come. And they also facilitate a lot of the activities at the CRC in terms of dances and other activities in the youth center there. Wanted to also comment on our ongoing ethics policy. We put together an ethics policy covering these 5 different areas in 2005, I believe. We adopted that. We reassert it every year. We ask all our commissioners and ourselves to re-sign and talk about our commitment to ethical behavior and so forth through the support of that policy. And it's just important, I think, to keep it in focus, to keep the whole idea of being transparent, being accessible to the community and so forth is very important to us. Okay, now I'm going to quickly review the goals that we set in 2007. We had a goal to have a surplus in the budget, and we did have a surplus in the budget, but that's kind of an ongoing thing. So the blue arrow pointing forward says, yeah, you know, if it's an up arrow, that's something we accomplished, but if it's the blue arrow, and you're going to see a lot of blue arrows, we always have more to do. We always have more to do. We've got the next year's budget always to be concerned about and so forth, so we want to keep that process going. We wanted to continue and enhance our service levels, and we did some study in terms of police and determined that we could, through our RDA support, 2.5 new positions there. We do have the economic development and housing specialists on board now, so we think that we have accomplished that goal. Now, public funding discussion. We had a goal to say, as we formulate our needs in terms of public safety, we want to get community involvement, we want to get community feedback. We started that process with what we call the community conversations in 2006, and The intent is to keep it going. But this is one where we've made it even a stronger goal. Now that we've set the base, and I'll tell you about that, we want to make it an ongoing goal to involve the public, and you'll find that that's one of my real themes this evening is public involvement. We wanted to adjust impact fees, and we did. So that one's done. We wanted more jobs, less vacancies. We wanted to develop land that was undeveloped, and we wanted to add a car dealer, and we didn't. We didn't do that one. That's the only one where I'll show you a down arrow. But I think we had some real good lessons learned out of that. We know now that we just can't ignore market conditions, that you can't just set goals and ignore what the market's going to do. You got to kind of put it where, you have control. So it's kind of the lesson of stick to the basics, what we were calling in our retreat the meat and potatoes, the kind of things that we can control. Those are things like land use, those are things like infrastructure, those are things like the assembly of parcels, things like that we can control, that are the business of city government can really do, and that's how we can best influence economic development, and we're going to keep that in mind going forward. In public safety, we had a strong goal there to establish what our staffing needs were, both in the police department and for our fire and emergency medical services. And in both cases, we did a great job, I think, of defining those needs. We have our hands around them, but more to do. Now that you know what the need is, you have to do something about it. So it's almost automatically an ongoing kind of thing. And that's where we're going to need a lot of help from you, the public, in terms of telling us where we ought to be going and how we ought to be doing that. Downtown, the public infrastructure schedule we put in place. We're on track now we had a goal that we wanted to be ready to break ground on 3rd Street as a promenade in the spring, and we're on track to do that, but we haven't really done it yet, so that's kind of an ongoing thing. And of course, acquiring the property is only one step in the redevelopment and we had kind of a specific goal on the Granada, and now we've assembled that along with the downtown mall, and we have to go forward with putting that together. Environmental was to develop the agenda. In September, we have developed a high-level agenda, and then we also put the work plan together in December and brought that forward and got that approved by the council. But then, as soon as you have a work plan in place, you have to implement it, so that's ongoing. Recreation and community services, again, a lot of ongoing things to do. What we did there was we set the goal that recreation and community services should cost the city out of its general fund no more than $1.6 million. And Mr. Reimer is on track to bring that in considerably under. He'll bring it in at about $1.4 million. So that one's on track. But it, of course, it remains an area of focus in the future. Friendly Inn, we did define the purpose there. It's going to become a nonprofit center. It'll take another year or so to get that done and developed and designed and so forth, so more to do again. We had a goal with our schools to restart our city and school liaison committee. Don Moody serves on that committee, and it is started. We meet on a bi-monthly basis, and we have gotten agreement with the school board and the city council to have a joint session of the entire bodies, and we'll be working together on what issues we want to address and so forth when we get together. Community development. We had some land use and circulation work plans. We're doing a huge circulation study this year, but we had to do the base work to get that going last year. We did that, and now we have to go ahead and implement it. So you see the blue arrow again, we're not done. The Measure C policy workshop we had, when was that, November? I think November. But now we have, and you'll see in our goals, follow-on work to do there as well in terms of looking at our housing strategy and analyzing that in a lot more detail. And then we had a couple of policy-making kinds of things to do. We wanted to integrate our goals and put them into our work plan and make sure the work plans that we were doing as council subcommittees and as commissions and committees were supportive of our goals. And We did a good start on that. We got that going. We have the work plans in place. We're going to work a little bit harder next year to kind of pay more attention to those work plans, to monitor them and have regular reporting on them so that we really make them work a little bit better. So that's the past, and like I say, the only reason I'm spending so much time on the past is because it sets such a base for the future. As I go through what we see needs to be done in 2008, you're going to see continuation and public involvement. Those are the two themes. Finish what we started. All those blue arrows are, what we started, and we need to keep going on. And then we want to get more involvement, make sure we're doing this right. So we subsetted our policies and goals into 3 areas this year. One we called Sustainable Morgan Hill. We have 4 areas there. We have 3 major initiatives and a couple more in the policy making. I've already kind of referenced them, that we're going to strengthen that a little bit. There we go. Oh, and notice I do have goals on that. That's the soccer goal. So that's my representation of goals. We'll see them as we go along. Sustainable Morgan Hill, we broke down into 4 areas, starting with fiscal responsibility. And this is this fantastic process that our city staff has put together that gets our budget in place every year. We follow, certain policies and so forth in getting that done. And our goal there is to keep doing it, to stick with the strategy that we have on the budget. We know, because we're so tight on the budget, you saw a very slight surplus from last year, and hopefully this year we'll have a surplus as well. But, we can't do anything more. So we said we can't do anything more, and then we said, we got this one kind of problem area we need to focus on where we really think we got to do some more. So we did create one goal that's really going to be a stretch for us kind of goal, but we are trying to find a way to do a more complete job on street operations and maintenance. We just don't, from the way that that's funded now through the vehicle fees and so forth, it does not cover enough to do everything. Operate the streets, which is the street lights, the lighting on the street and so forth. And rather than have to look at turning some of the street lights out, we have asked that we see if we can come up with some kind of strategy, some kind of a real stretch strategy, so that we can make street operation and maintenance work. For economic development, we have an economic development strategy, and we kind of set some goals last year that I told you we were kind of out of bounds in terms of, we don't control whether a new car dealer comes to Morgan Hill. The car dealer controls that. We can't control that. So, we're kind of more back to the ongoing meat and potatoes kinds of things that we're doing, especially in the downtown, assembling parcels, maybe manipulating some fees a little bit if we need to. And definitely doing the infrastructure, the curb and gutter and parking and street lights and so forth. We do have one goal in terms of working with private enterprise. If they want to go in with us to do a competitive assessment that might produce, we'll go in with them on that and see what the results are and see if that might influence our economic development strategy in any way. So that's just the one goal there. In terms of the smart growth, we do have this follow-on that our economic development subcommittee is working on in terms of the housing strategy, with particular emphasis on affordable housing. We're in a situation now with the housing market, as you're all well aware, where it's just kind of cratered. And it's put a lot more burden on the developers in terms of what they have to do to subsidize affordable housing, and they're saying that we ought to be doing things different. We still have a very strong need in terms of more affordable housing, however, so doing things different that makes it more expensive for low-income people is just not the right direction. So how do you make all that work together? And that's kind of what that's all about in terms of doing the housing assessment there. We don't really have any goals on our environmental protection aspect of a sustainable Morgan Hill. That's because we put a strategy in place. We've got a work plan in place. We need to execute on that work plan. And we need your help on that. That's something where we're going to need a lot of help from the public because almost every element of that work plan involves public participation in some way, shape, or form. But that work plan was designed to be for the first 6 months, so we need to extend that. And we need to also work with other cities, other entities, government entities on what they're doing so that we are not maybe on the bleeding edge, but we are keeping up with what's the state of the art in terms of being environmental. And we are doing that. We are participating in a lot of the Santa Clara County, especially task forces on environmental objectives and so forth. We'll go into our major initiatives. I think we start here with a spectacular, we start with public safety funding. That's huge. That's where last year we said, once we define our needs, we've got to start getting the public involved and see where we go. What we ended up doing last year was defining a need that we feel is not a pressing emergency need. It's not any kind of a crisis situation, but we have really studied what our police department is and how it operates and determined that it could operate better with significant increases in staffing. We were able to add 2.5 positions last year, but we really need about 9 more so that we can go to a different kind of shift operation and really be set for the future as we grow further. We've grown quite a bit. We're almost 39,000 population now. And as we go forward, we think we're going to need better staffing and better deployment of that staffing in the police department. So the question is, okay, you're not in danger, there's no emergency, and yet you have to take this kind of giant step. Adding 1 or 2 officers, you can't change the shifts and you can't do a lot of the things that they really want to accomplish. So it becomes the question of how do you do this? And the City Council have decided we want to try to do it. We want to see if the public is willing to support it. And to have the public really willing to support it, we need to educate them to the point that we've been educated in terms of what the real needs are so that they can knowledgeably assess the situation. Because if we ask them to vote for some kind of a increase in taxes to be able to fund this kind of thing, we want them to be knowledgeable of what that is. So we're asking for a lot of help in that situation in terms of outreach to the community. We'll try to explain that whole staffing scenario for the police department. Where we ended up on our assessment for fire and emergency medical services is we're examining an alternative that was presented to us of instead of contracting for fire and emergency medical services, annexing into the fire district instead. That means that they would get their own cut of the pie when you divide up property taxes. And they would be able to operate based on whatever we determine could be the slice of the pie. So is that a feasible thing to do? We think it is. We're going to study it, and in a couple of months we'll know whether it's feasible or not. Then we can study the benefits and how to implement it, or if we determine it's not feasible, we'll have to look at another way of having fire at some point in time. Again, with fire services, we don't feel there's any imminent danger. We have coverage from the 2 stations that we contract for with County Fire, plus the South County Fire Station that's operated by CAL FIRE down south on a mutual aid agreement. But at some point in time, you need another station. And when you need another station to fully man it, you got to add 3 shifts worth of fire people. And we're looking at alternatives to that, of maybe starting with emergency medical only and so forth. But we want to see how this annexation study comes out before we go into a lot more detail on some of the alternatives. But then, you know, if we determine that we want to ask the public for money, we got to determine what form that takes. And that is a big study that needs a lot of public input, a lot of advice. Do you want to do something with sales tax? Do you want to do something with a property assessment? Do you want it to be general purpose where you only need 50% of the voters to support it? Do you want it to be specific purpose where you need 2/3 of the voters to support it? All questions that have not been answered and need your help. So encourage that. Our spectacular downtown, it's pretty small, but that was the conceptual layout of the promenade on 3rd Street. That's the picture there. I'm trying to get some pictures onto these charts. We have a draft of what we call a specific plan for the downtown. It's out in draft form. It's available on our website, the city's website. And we have to get that finalized by the council within the next couple of months, because we do an EIR, an environmental impact report, based on what we adopt as our specific plan. We've had some public hearings on that. We had a great session, I understand, last Tuesday night in this room. Had a lot of people here, so here again, it's an area where we're looking for public input, public support of the direction that we're trying to go in for the downtown, and appreciate all the help that we can get on that. Now, when you add housing, I think you all understand that a large part of where we want to go with downtown is put a lot of housing there. So we build up the maybe in San Jose they call it the 24-hour downtown. Maybe here we call it the 16-hour downtown. And we have the kind of vitality 16 hours a day instead of just the usual 8-9 hours a day that we have experienced. And when you go to add a lot of housing, what you need to do when it's downtown concentrated housing is build all that housing at once. You can't just allocate several units every year and get there in the end. It's kind of like the fire station. You have to add all the firemen at once. You can't add 1 or 2 firemen at a time. So you have to do all of that. And that is not really compatible with what we have in our residential development control system, our Measure C process. Our Measure C process is conducive to doling out a few at a time. So we have some challenges in terms of making the residential development control system and the downtown plan come into sync. And here again, we may have to go to voters to ask for some changes, because as you know, the residential development control system is a voter initiative thing, so any change to it would have to be approved by the voter. So again, these are all areas where we need help in terms of you guys telling us where we need to be going. Flood protection, I showed you the pictures from January 4th, and we are very, very strongly committed to addressing that. Mr. Carr next week, Mr. Sellers the week after next, and me sometime in April, we'll all be going back to Washington, D.C. We have hired essentially a lobbyist that will be helping us, but we'll be going to our senators, our Congress members, not just our own, but neighboring ones that have been part of this process in the past, and we will be working extremely hard to secure the federal funding. Last year, Jerry McNerney, our congressman, was successful in terms of getting our project authorized. And that's a big step. We had not been authorized for 7 years. I mean, we were not even an authorized project for 7 years. They were able to dribble some money our way so that we could keep some work going, but we were not an authorized project. So now, thanks to Congressman McNerney, we are an authorized project. However, we don't have any money. So that's the task that's at hand, is to secure that money somehow. And you know what a tight budget year it is at every single level, including the federal level. Okay, in terms of policy making, just a few things. In our committees, we have a goal that we will kind of strengthen that whole idea of work plans. We had work plans last year. We asked them from our council committees and our commissions. And we're going to ask for them again this year, and then we're going to try to really follow them, make sure that the agendas meet the work plans, and that we, especially from the council subcommittee standpoint, we get quarterly reports on the status toward those work plans. Just trying to strengthen that process a little. I'll talk about the communications policy. We don't really have a goal there. We just I've been talking a lot about needing very strongly public input from you folks in terms of what direction we ought to be going. And we want to make sure that the information that you have makes you an informed member of the public, so that you can help us, that you have accurate information. So we put some policies in place to make sure that we're communicating accurately and things are being reported accurately, and then we have process for that. And then on training, we work together as a council. We try to collaborate as much as we can, but I think any kind of team can always get stronger, and we kind of recognize that. We're looking for opportunities for any kind of team building or interpersonal skill building kinds of opportunities that we have. We all have our own family lives, our own businesses in many cases, so it's not going to be easy to get that scheduled, but we're looking at an opportunity for doing that. So this is kind of a summary. We're in business, the council's in business to make Morgan Hill better. The people that serve on our commissions, committees, they're all volunteering so that they can make Morgan Hill a better place. And I think that last year we accomplished that. I think Morgan Hill really made great progress last year. We had a very, very productive year if you think back at all those pictures of things that we've accomplished. But we had almost every single area had one of those blue arrows. So we got a lot more to do. We got to finish it up. We got to finish what we started. And we really need as much input as we can get to do that. So again, encourage you to participate. Public involvement. So on behalf of the City Council, in past, I think last year I tried to single out each single council member as to what their input was on a certain task. I think this year I'd like to recognize the City Council as a whole for the way that we've been able to work together. Even though we have separate committees working on things, they come back to the council, we all make the final decision, and we're all having input into each of these areas that I'm showing you. So rather than single out members that are working separately, I'd like to acknowledge the entire council for the work that they're doing together. And thank you for being here, and I'll entertain any questions you may have. Thank you. Chuck.
Excuse me, you kind of nibbled around the edges. Given the current situation of the economy, is a big factor in living.
Correct.
Are you getting an economic study to underpin these things, or where it says if this happens, we'll do this, if not, we'll do that?
Not specifically. We've got some economic study kinds of things going with our Southeast Quadrant, which is an ongoing project as well. We're looking at a recreational approach there. Our economic development strategy has certain goals within it to understand the kinds of things that you're talking about. The one thing that we do know is that this private enterprise wants to go in with us on a competitive assessment, which I think might help in that area. But overall, how do you react based on where the economy is? We kind of learned last year that we can't automatically say, let's do a car dealer. So let's stick with the things we can do. So, yeah, Gloria.
Yes, I'm just curious. I think it's wonderful that we have all the outlets here and we can keep our tax base in Morgan Hill. But I'm wondering what will be the effect of trying to redevelop downtown?
What we're trying to do, and the developer of the Cockton Commons Shopping Center is working with us on this, is trying to delineate between the types of things that go downtown and the types of things that are out there in the periphery. I went to a very interesting thing at the joint venture thing last Friday that was a whole study in how to do that and how to congregate different things in different places. And it kind of showed me that we're on track, but maybe we ought to look at some different things where we're trying to get those that serve the downtown population, the people that are going to live there, and the people that we can draw from outside to come down there. One of the interesting things that Ed Please reported back from the session that was here on the downtown a couple of weeks ago was that the property owners downtown and the business owners downtown wanted parking in front of their shops, and the people that are part of the community that don't have shops downtown wanted the shops downtown to be of the nature that they would be more than willing to walk several blocks to them. And I think that second thing is kind of what we're looking for in terms of the separation of kinds of stores that are downtown and so forth. Anybody else? Yes. We'll take him here first.
There was back 3 years ago, we went to the conversation with the community. We attended some of those, and some of the things that came out of that was we had to figure out as residents of Morgan Hill, how do we generate revenue? And one of those ideas was, let's get people to get off the 101. How do we get people off the 101 and get them into Morgan Hill? I think with the Cochran Commons and some of the other projects that we have going on, this is going to resolve that issue, start bringing in revenue off of the highway, because they just bypass Morgan Hill. It's the chance to go south to Gilmore.
Correct.
And I think we've done that. That's just a thank you for that, because I think that is helping the economy of the city. One of the other things that you were talking about here was, or that was mentioned in the community, was the a cap on the growth of the city. I think the sentiments of the people that were in the meeting was that how do we do that, generate more revenue, but yet keep this small town feel?
Yes.
And at that point, there was a statement, and I think this was, I forget who or how it was said, but there was a statement that said, we're looking at a cap of not more than 40,000 residents by 2020.
48,000. We're already at 39,000. So
Right. So how are we doing as far as that growth is concerned?
We are on track in terms of that 48,000 in 2020 goal, and as I pointed out, our downtown plans may be asking for something that maybe makes it more not a smooth growth, but an accelerated growth, or maybe makes it even a larger growth than the 48,000. That's where we have the problem, is the incompatibility with the downtown plan. But residential development control system was enacted in 1977 by residents when infrastructure just wasn't keeping up with anything. And it's been embraced by our population ever since. And keeping the small town feel, that element of Morgan Hill that we all love, that was kind of the major emphasis of my State of the City message last year, so I didn't repeat that too much, but it's still, I think, at the very base of what we as a council take as an absolute mandate from the people that are here. Dwayne?
Steve, what's involved in the flood control project, basically?
Well, the flood control project was started in the 1950s, and they built it up through Gilroy. And what it involves is taking the channels that go through town, some right out here, some right next to us in the street, and you know, putting them, constructing enough capacity to take the 100-year flood, which is the worst flood that would ever occur within a 100-year period, and carry it safely without any overflow, any flooding of the types that we saw in those photographs. And so it's a very, very complex project of designing where that goes exactly, acquiring the property, doing the environmental impact analysis, and whatever impacts are defined there. There's going to be mitigations that are going to have to be undertaken for them. It's a huge undertaking. The budget's about $110 million. That's why it's just impractical. I didn't mention this, but it is not practical for the city to find somewhere in their budget an extra $110 million. I think we all realize that. We will, however, if there's some way that we can kickstart by throwing in some money and maybe get reimbursed for it later, whatever we can do of that nature, we will do to kickstart this project and keep it on track and keep it going. We want to start the major construction piece of the activity in the year 2010, and that's a determined objective. Well, let's have some cookies. Thank you. Thank you for being here.